radar. Today, I'm lucky enough to be joined by Brad Fischetti of LFO. Brad, how we doing?
Nick, what's up, buddy? How are you?
I'm real good, man. Real good. How you doing with all the craziness in the world today?
Well, I've made a concentrated effort of late to not watch the news and stay off social media. And so when you do those kind of things, you have a little bit more peace. Because I think the fact of the matter is if you're talking about the COVID, people just don't really know. They're making their best guesses they can. And if you listen to one side, it's no big deal. Listen to the other side, the world's going to end, but the truth's probably somewhere in between.
Right. A lot of things. And that's good advice. Stay off of social media. Don't watch the news and try to live your best life, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So now I want to jump deep into the LFO story, but first, I want to know, what are you up to in 2020? Do you have any projects or anything like that?
Well, in 2020, I had a bunch of dates booked with the Pops 2000 tour. It's a tour with O-Town and Ryan Cabrera. Usually Lance from Nsync is the host and does a little performance as well. And then this year, Mark from Sugar Ray was supposed to join the tour. And so I joined that tour late last year. And basically, sometimes I host or co-host, but then I also do an LFO medley together with the O-Town guys. And so we had a bunch of dates booked for this summer. And obviously with the COVID, those dates were postponed till next year. So at this point, it's just a matter of just being prepared and being ready to hit the road in 2021.
Gotcha. Something to look forward to for all the LFO fans.
Yes, indeed.
All right. So we're in the mid 90s. How did LFO become a group?
Well, I had an interest in the entertainment business. Specifically, I was really into rap, and I was into modeling at that time. My older brother, worked for Lou Pearlman's blimp company up in New York. So before Lou Pearlman got in the music business, he had a blimp company, the McDonald's blimp and a few others.
Okay.
I think the Budweiser blimp maybe. And so he worked for Lou's company, and I got a chance to get to know Lou, coming visiting on vacation. Eventually they moved the company down to Florida, so I come down to Florida, and I guess when I was probably about 16 is when they first started putting the Backstreet Boys together, and got a chance to witness that in its infancy. And as time went on, and Lou's focus turned more and more to music, my brother said, "Why don't you move down to Florida? We've got the Backstreet Boys over in Europe. They're starting to make some waves, and I know you're really into your rap music, so why not?" So at this point, I was living in Texas and I was in college. So I said to my mom, I said, "Listen, I'm moving to Florida to be a rapper."
Nice.
Yeah, you can imagine how that went,
right?
And so eventually, I did get down, and I just started working for Lou. I was driving his limo, stocking his fridge, just trying to figure out, well, what's my focus going to be in this career. And I was at his house one day, and the doorbell rang, and it was Rich, and the guy that used to be in LFO. And long story short, Lou's like, "Well, you guys are both doing the same kind of music. Why don't you consider just becoming one group?" And that's how it started.
Awesome. So what was your first impression of Rich when you saw him?
That's a good question. No one's ever asked me that. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. I don't really remember. I remember opening the door and them being there, but I don't remember really having any sort of impression. I guess the biggest thing that stood out was their Boston accents. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Because I was from New Jersey, and I'd never been around somebody from Boston. And so, I'll never forget one time over the phone telling me how to send a fax.
Okay.
Right? And he's like, "Yeah, push the stat button." He said, "Push the stat button." I said, "Stat? Like, I don't see a stat. There's no button that says stat, He was saying start. So, listen, Rich was a extraordinarily talented kid. People don't really know this, but he was one of the greatest rappers alive. I'm not saying that, he would destroy Biggie in a battle, but If you gave him a beat and a microphone, he would hold his own with anybody on a freestyle. Obviously, LFO's music was a little bit more pop than it was hip hop, so you didn't really get a chance to hear a lot of it. But certainly, how we started was as a rap group, and Rich Cronin was one of the greatest rappers ever lived.
Yeah, very talented rapper. Very, I would still say underrated. When you say one of the greatest of all time, I don't disagree with that. And I feel like he should get a little more respect in the rap game. Now, you talked about the other original member. So you're talking about Brian Gillis was with him when he showed up?
Yeah.
Okay. How'd you like working with Brian?
Listen, Brian was a guy that was extraordinarily motivated. He was a hard worker, really smart, and just really wouldn't take no for an answer, you know. And if it wasn't for his effort in the early days, Rich would have probably never came to Florida, and we would have never met.
So he worked with you guys, did some cover songs like Step by Step, Sex You Up, If I Can't Have You. Now, then he left the group shortly after that. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, and at the end, towards the end of '98, early '99, he left the group, and then and Devin joined the group.
Okay.
And it was shortly after that we got signed to Arista Records, and shortly after that Summer Girls hit.
Excellent. So Devin joined the group. You guys had an open audition. When you saw him perform, did you know right away that was your guy?
It was not an open audition. And Devin was working with a guy that to this day is, you know, I would consider him the fourth member of LFO, and that's a guy named Mike Caputo.
Okay.
And Mike brought Devin into the mix. And so, yeah, you know, actually we were overseas. We were in England when all this went down. I remember coming back and hearing Devin on one of our songs and going, wow, what a beautiful voice, you know? So it wasn't an easy transition, man. You know, obviously when one member leaves and another member adds, it's not easy. And there's lots to the story, which is, in my opinion, really not just, it's a story and it's not something I really want to talk a whole lot about.
Sure.
But I have a lot of respect for Briz because he was a hardworking guy. At Rich's funeral in 2010, we sort of made amends, and we've kept in touch since then. And like I said, I have a lot of respect and nothing but love for him. And he's somebody I've prayed for every day for many years. So I wish nothing but peace for him.
Excellent. Really good to hear. So you brought up Summer Girls, obviously a smash hit, not just in the United States, all over the world. How did your life change?
Well, I guess you went from being hoping that you'd have a gold record to having one hanging on the wall, and then a platinum record, and then the opportunity to travel. I mean, once you have a hit song, you could essentially stay on the road for a year or two or longer, you know? So it just gave us a lot of opportunities. We did a lot of really cool TV shows. We participated in some really great tours. We headlined the big Nickelodeon, all that tour, which was a bunch of amphitheaters. So we got to live, you know, that sort of life that you'd imagine when you have a hit song, which was followed up with another hit song. So, yeah, you know, it was a time of your life where you think it's never going to end, right?
Sure.
You know, and who would have thought 3 years later we would have taken a hiatus, which in like the boy band terms means broke up.
So you said boy band. Do you consider yourself a boy band?
You know, at the time we didn't like being called a boy band. We felt like we were different than the prototypical boy bands. I think at that time too, the word boy band had a negative connotation. I think people assume boy bands are these contrived groups of pretty boys, where maybe there was a bunch of pretty boys, but there were some really talented pretty boys in that mix, you know. You know, think about Nsync and guys like Justin Timberlake and all the guys in that band that were extraordinarily talented. Backstreet Boys, another group full of talented dudes, 98 Degrees, O-Town, you know, really just great, talented guys in those groups. So these days, I totally accept the term. It's because I'm LFO is considered a boy band, and I get a chance to be a part of some cool things like, New Kids on the Block did a new song called Boys in the Band.
Right.
And Donnie asked me and some other guys to do some little videos for their video. So I welcome the term now, man. And looking back, we kind of were a boy band. So was 112, Jagged Edge, Silk, Shy. Like all these bands. If you look at them, like guys singing together, doing some dancing, dressing similarly. Obviously we sort of pulled away from that, as we became more successful as far as like the synchronized dancing and such. But, we always felt like we were a little bit different. And, I think people to this day will say, yeah, they are. LFO is different. I'll put them in the category of the boy bands, but just a little bit different.
We talked about your smash hit Summer Girls. Then you brought up a little bit with the follow up with Girl on TV. Huge song. Again, it didn't just chart in the States. It charted all over the world. Now, what was going through your mind at the time?
Girl on TV was a smash hit. It was affected by the fact that the song was essentially written about Jennifer Love Hewitt, and she was in the video, and she was also Carson Daly's girlfriend, who was the host of TRL. So at some point, Carson and Love broke up and Rich dated her, and I don't know exactly of all the timings involved, but it was enough to where I don't think Carson was too excited about playing LFO videos, especially one with his ex-girlfriend in it. So that sort of affected its release a bit, but it was still a very successful song. The real sort of turning point with that first record was the next single, which we were pushing for it to be West Side Story, because that was another song that we wrote, and that was sort of very much in line with Summer Girls and Girl on TV. But because, some thought of us as a boy band, the label felt it necessary to take the sort of boy band route of releasing a ballad next. That really wasn't our thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But they wanted to release I Don't Want to Kiss You Goodnight next. And in certain markets, that was a big song. But overall, it wasn't a big hit. And that sort of set us up for sort of like the end of that album cycle. They did release West Side Story in some capacity, but not like a real single. So I always felt like that cost us a bunch of records, personally. But nonetheless, successful first album and very fortunate, very blessed to have had that experience.
For sure. So we talk about the boy band thing. So I was in college at the time. I DJ'd a lot of our frat parties. Now, if I were to listen to Nsync or Backstreet Boys, by the way, I was a fan of them, but I might get made fun of. But I could play Nelly, I could play DMX, I could follow it up with Girl on TV, and no one would bat an eye. It was that big of a song. I feel you guys crossed over to a hip hop community a little bit better than some of the other boy band groups.
Yeah, I think we had some respect. I definitely witnessed that. Running into people in that community, people like Puffy and the like, that showed a lot of respect for us. And that's really, I thought that's how we were going to come out. But you have to remember, in those days, rap wasn't really on mainstream radio very much. I mean, there were some stations that would not play Girl on TV only simply because it had an 8-bar rap in it. So, in 1999 and 2000, you didn't get a lot of rap on mainstream radio. So, obviously these days is much different. But back then, we saw a little bit of pushback because of it. But that's how we started, hip hop is in our roots. You know what I mean? That's how we all started getting interested in music.
Brought up Carson Daly and Girl on TV. So I remember the song had a lot of steam. It was huge. Now, I remember there were rumors that he took it off of TRL completely because of Rich dating Jennifer Love Hewitt. Now, that could have possibly delayed some of the sales or pushed it back again. The song was absolutely huge. But you think there's actually some credibility to that then?
Well, the original plan was it was going to get a TRL premiere, which was the big way to premiere videos back then. And then it got changed to being just a world premiere. And then it got changed to just added into rotation. So
interesting.
It just, they played it, but it didn't get the push that you would expect it to get. And I guess at the same time, I don't blame them. I'd be pissed off too some dude, stole my girlfriend, wrote a song about her, and put her in a music video, and I had to play it on a show that I hosted. I mean, it was a little bit like if we'd expect him to act otherwise would be silly. So now there was never like a public beef with Carson. Obviously, we felt the tension, but we made amends with him too in 2001, and we did a couple of his shows, and I think everything was sort of settled.
Did you get to know Jennifer Love Hewitt well?
Yeah, I mean, she'd come around. Obviously, we did the video with her in it, and then she'd come around to some shows and things like that. She was a very kind, sweet, funny person. We didn't become like best buddies or anything, but spent enough time around her to know that she was a really, really good person.
You brought up West Side Story. If somebody doesn't think Rich Cronin can rap, listen to that song for starters. Just the way he attacks that song is unbelievable, by the way.
We do a little piece of that in the LFO medley that I do on the Pop 2000 tour. We start with just like the breakdown into the rap, into the chorus of West Side Story.
Okay.
That's how the whole thing starts. So yeah, it's a great song and a great performance on his behalf.
Now, you guys are very well known for having these outside of the box lyrics, but you use them to perfection. So how would you take it to the record label? For example, how do you go to a producer? I've got lyrics where it says Shooby Doo Wop and Scooby Snacks. What is their reaction? Are they on board? Do they give you some pushback?
I think, that was sort of Rich's brainchild, and with the success of Summer Girls, I think they encouraged more and more of our spin on the songs, which is why songs like Girl on TV and West Side Story made it onto that first record. And I think Rich became known for being the guy with the quirky lyrics,
Definitely. They were awesome. Now, I also heard that he would take pieces of paper, maybe a Post-it, he'd write something down, just random words, and try to combine them to help write lyrics or something. Is that accurate?
I mean, I haven't heard that story, but it's possible. He wrote a song after he was diagnosed with cancer called "Story of My Life," and in it he talks about crumpled up paper on the bedroom floor. So maybe he did do that.
Right. That was a great song off of $1 Billion Sound. Segue into your second album. You had "Life Is Good," which was one of the singles, the name of the album, and you also had "Every Other Time," a hit song, actually one of my favorites. How was the mentality of the group when the second album came out?
I don't think we were not very united at that point in time. There was a lot of tension within the group. Rich and Devin had solo aspirations. This was right after 9/11 and right about the time Napster was really affecting album sales dramatically. So, it was before the music industry had figured out a way to sell music digitally. So, that first record that we sold almost 2 million copies. The second album sold like 350,000. Mm-hmm. So, I think there's a number of reasons for that, but I think the main reason was just the advent of Napster and the way people consume music.
Okay.
So that being said, we're already sort of losing our unity, and then add to that the fact that the album didn't really come out and have a huge first week. Every Other Time was a big hit, indeed. But after that, it just sort of, things just sort of fizzled. And, we got to the point in early 2002 where we had a choice to go overseas and, tour with O-Town or just take a break. And at that point, we decided to take a break. Was it the right choice? Probably not. Now that I had a chance to look back on it, you should have worked harder to maintain a good unity in the group and gone out there and toured for as long as people will come watch you play. Because from one minute to the next, it's gone, it's over. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's sort of what happened was we took a break and then it was over. So yeah, that's not easy.
Okay. So you guys are doing your own thing. So Rich was doing some solo. So was Devin. What were you doing around that time? Were you doing solo? Were you trying to do some rapping?
I started a record label.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I started a record label pretty much immediately after we, took our break. And, within maybe a year or two, I had distribution through the Warner Music Group. And it's still a label that I run today, almost 20 years later.
Awesome. What artists have you brought through your record label?
So my label was in the indie rock genre. Some call it emo. I would say the most successful record or artist on the label is called The Spill Canvas, and they have a great following around the world. The Reign of Kindo, another band that's still out there touring, selling out, clubs. Really extraordinary musicians. Rookie of the Year is another one that's still out there, doing his thing. So, yeah, I had a lot of bands, and it was a great time in my life, and it was really just actually I put out a record on Devin called Devin Lima and the Cadbury Diesel. That was his first solo record, and that is really one of the greatest pop records of that time. And then I was in discussions with Rich to do a solo record on Rich too.
Okay.
But we never got a chance to make that happen. So I stayed in the music business for sure. Those guys, like I said, had a lot of aspirations to do solo records, so they continued working on those kind of things. And I focused on my label. There was enough tension to where I think everybody just needed to get away from each other for a while,
Gotcha.
Devin sort of wound up staying close to where I lived. So, we were able to keep up a little bit better than we were able to keep up with Rich.
So around 2007, Rich was on Mission Man Band. You had Chris Kirkpatrick, you had Brian Abrams in that group. Do you remember that time frame? What did you think of that project?
Yeah, the Mission Man Band, Chris Kirkpatrick and I were just talking about that the other day. Guys really created quite a bond on that show. And I think they had some really cool music in the pipeline ready to be released. And he told me that Rich was really pushing hard for them to do some music together, to make it more than just a TV show. My opinion was I wasn't too thrilled with the way they portrayed the boys. I think they portrayed them purposefully in a way to make them look less good. Mm-hmm. Not that they didn't look good. I didn't watch every episode. But I don't really feel like they got a fair shake with the way things were portrayed, with what they chose to add. But I still think you got a chance to get a glimpse of how funny Rich was, because not only was he one of the greatest rappers, he was also one of the funniest guys on the planet. And so you got a little glimpse in that. And, Lou Pearlman used to say, any motion's promotion. So for people in that world, for Rich, I think it was like, well, it may not be my dream job, but just pushing me forward in my career.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because, I enjoyed the show. We really got to know Rich, which was awesome. I remember it almost seemed like they were making it look like they were desperate. And I remember for some reason, Jeff Timmons got a little mad. He's like, hello, I'm still part of 98 Degrees. We still have egos. You can't talk to us like that or something along those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how you call a guy from like Nsync desperate who sold like 100 million records. It's
right.
Like, and like you said, 98 Degrees, was still a group. Now listen, at that time, there wasn't a huge market for 98 Degrees or LFO or O-Town, whereas today the market's there because our fans are grown up now. You know what I mean? They're settled. They're probably out of college. They might have some expendable income and they might want to go back and relive the glory days of being in high school, So, mm-hmm. But there's that little window where people aren't that interested. Same thing happened with New Kids on the Block. They were the biggest band on the planet. And then for a number of years, really nobody seemed to care. But then all of a sudden, now they're bigger than they have ever been, right? Those guys can sell out arenas again, which is a beautiful thing. So, yeah, I don't like the way they portrayed the boys on the show, but that's the dangers you get into when you're doing reality TV,
That's for sure. Now, we brought up Lou Pearlman a couple of times. I don't know that I've heard many good or positive stories about him. I just want to know what your opinion was. How did you like working with him?
People ask about Lou Pearlman all the time, and I don't have a lot to say about him except for one, if it wasn't for Lou Pearlman and him dumping millions of dollars into, a bunch of sort of unknown guys, you wouldn't have Backstreet Boys, you wouldn't have Nsync, you wouldn't have LFO. Now, whether every single step along the way was great or right or just or good, I can't say that's the truth. But fact is, if it wasn't for him, you wouldn't have had all these great artists. Could we have had better deals? Yeah. Could he have been a little bit more flexible in renegotiating deals? Yes. Could he have been one of the biggest music moguls on the planet? Yes. Unfortunately, he had some other stuff going on in his life that overshadowed his talents. Rich was diagnosed with leukemia, and we sort of banded together to try to help him the best we could. But it didn't really see a lot of him sort of during the battle years of the leukemia. And then in 2009, we decided to reunite for a tour. And that was the first time we'd all been together in a while. And the tour wasn't financially successful, but it was successful in the way that we got a chance to realize just how much we loved each other.
Awesome.
We really bonded on that tour, unlike any other tour we've been on. Rich was still sick at the time. He was fighting off another disease, which was like a side effect of his stem cell transplant. And so he was having a tough time getting around. So we let him relax. During the day, we put him on the back of the bus and we gave him the whole back lounge. And, he was able to just relax back there during the day. And then, we'd get his suitcase for him and help him get dressed. And then at nighttime we'd get up on that stage. And as soon as he hit the stage, he was good. He'd just find his place in the middle and just do his thing. And he rocked those shows. And then we were making plans for another tour. He was having some problems. So I texted him and said, "Hey man, I heard you're having some problems with your legs. I figured the best way to get you out of bed is to schedule a tour. So what do you think?" And he didn't respond. And then a week later, I texted him on his birthday. He didn't respond. And then a week later, I found out he died.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
It's a huge loss for the whole music industry.
Yeah, indeed it was, man. He's a really talented man, responsible for some really cool songs. And, I think deserves his place in the industry. It was kind of frustrating that year. The next Grammys after he passed, they didn't even mention Rich when they do their little montage at the end.
Are you kidding me?
Like they'll put like a record executive or a session musician but here we got the guy who penned, multi-platinum songs, and they didn't even mention him. Yeah, it's messed up.
Yeah, I mean, Billboard even named Summer Girls the 14th biggest summer song of all time. Just for an example. I mean, it's obviously stand the test of time. That makes no sense. Wow.
Yeah. That's what you're saying. Remember, they don't give the boy bands respect, man, So there's still that part of the industry that doesn't respect the boy band. I mean, fast forward, we haven't even gotten into the track of Devin Lima.
Right.
He passed away. And I contacted Clive Davis, who's, if you don't know Clive, he's responsible for the Whitney Houstons and Bruce Springsteens of the world, and he was behind us. And and he's still in the industry. And I said, Clive, I said, when Rich died, the Grammys didn't even mention him. And here we have Devin, who rocked the Grammy stage. He performed on the Grammys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
On top of being, a successful musician. I said, can you please contact them and make sure they honor him and honor Rich? And he did. I saw the emails and they still didn't honor him. I couldn't believe it. I watched it and I was like, how do you not honor a man who performed on your stage?
Right.
Who sold millions of records, who's got a beautiful voice, talented. So it got me pretty good, man. But then I decided, you know what? I'm not going to look for love in places where I'm not meant to be. And so it's the love from the fans, love from people like you. That's the kind of love I'm going to seek. I'm not going to seek the attention of people who don't want anything to do with me. So, I'm still hurt that they didn't honor Rich. I'm hurt that they didn't honor Devin, but it is what it is. The fact of the matter is I'm going to put my attention on those who do honor Rich and honor Devin and LFO.
Brad, I'm hurt and I'm not even part of the group. You got to be kidding me. You guys were pretty close to a household name. It wasn't like he was some random act or something. You got to be kidding me.
No, we were. I mean, there was a time in my life where you couldn't even go to a restaurant. So, The LFO experience, I look at it like, what do they call some of Shakespeare's plays, the tragedies, right?
Mhm.
The LFO story is really a tragedy.
It is.
And the real heart of the story, like the deepest, darkest truths of the story are tragic. And so, I guess you just get to a point where you can decide, um, what your response is. You know what I mean? That's where I think where the word responsibility comes from. And so I have the ability to respond. And so I've decided, you know what? I'm going to take this tragic situation that, yes, we had some amazing experiences. I'm not discounting the fact that we had some really cool experiences. We had a handful of years where we made really good money, but the good, doesn't necessarily outweigh the bad. But I've decided to say, you know what? I'm going to take all those experiences and I'm not going to let them, uh, fester wounds, I'm going to say, I'm going to think about the good times, focus on the fans who experienced a lot of joy and brought a lot of joy to us, and focusing on honoring Rich, honoring Devin, and helping to keep the LFO legacy alive. I think that's the best thing that I can do, as opposed to just saying, well, there's a lot of bad stuff that happened, so I'm just going to put it to bed and put it under the carpet. That's just not the way I'm going to do things. So, it was a tough experience, and obviously it's it's a tragic experience. I'm not going to say it has ended in tragedy because I'm still here, but I don't have Rich and I don't have Devin, and that's a tragedy. And it's not only for me, but it's a tragedy for the world. And,
Yes.
it's not the way I'd want it, not the way I'd write it, not the way I imagined it. And honestly, I didn't even imagine doing anything even like this. It was when Devin died, it was like, all right, that's it. It's over. I don't want anything to do with it. It was hard enough to get things back rolling without Rich,
Yeah.
That came after a lot of prayer, a lot of discernment, a lot of talking. Um, and we knew Rich loved LFO, and when you love something, you don't want to see it die. So that was sort of the impetus to say, no, let's go ahead, let's keep this thing going.
Sure.
And, but then after Devin, it was like, well, what the hell can I do? It's done. It's gone. You know what I mean? Not only would I not want to do it with anybody else, just you don't honor the boys by replacing them. So what do I do now? And so I was just like, whatever, it's finished. I'll move on. But then my agent called me up one day and he said, listen, we got this Pop 2000 tour. Lance can't make a few dates. Would you want to go out there and host a few dates and then do like a little LFO medley with the old towns? And, I was like, wow, I never imagined doing something like that. But I did. And, it was extraordinarily emotional. It's like reliving it every night. You get on stage, you talk about the boys, you do a medley, you smile, and then as soon as I step off the stage, it's like I'm a mess. Because it's such an emotional experience. But,
Couldn't imagine. I really couldn't.
yeah, but the love and support from the fans has been amazing. It's really been so heartwarming. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just absolutely heartbreaking. And now I watched the videos of when you guys were rehearsing and touring around 2009. And Rich, of course, had his album Billion Dollar Sound. I saw the excitement in your guys' eyes, almost like there was a sense of urgency. You just couldn't wait to go out and perform for fans again. It was unbelievable just watching it, but just really sad.
Yeah, I was really, like I told you earlier, that was not a successful tour financially, but not only did it help us realize how much we love each other, but it wound up being Rich's last stand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was so thankful that he got a chance to do what he loved to do best before he passed, cause he loved nothing more than rocking the stage. So
Sure.
for me, it was worth it. It was worth losing money for him to have the opportunity to tour one last time. And then in 2017, when Devin and I reunited for the Rich in Love tour, who would have thought that was going to be Devin's last time? Unbelievable. And yeah, so I'm so thankful for both those tours. Really, it's like, they hold very special memories. And yeah, obviously they're different. We didn't play 10,000 seat rooms,
Right.
but the experiences were so profound, especially now that they're gone, that, those memories really stick in my mind like a 10,000 seat room memory would.
Absolutely. Yeah, just heartbreaking. You also, I did want to acknowledge real quick, you guys had that perfect 10. Yourself and Devin created a song. I thought that was a great song myself.
Yeah.
What went into the motivation of that?
We were talking with Shep and Aaron. Shep and Aaron are producers. They've got a couple of real big hits under their belt. I think one of the recent hits they had was the "Best Day of My Life" song. But Shep and his former partner Kenny did a bunch of songs with us on our second record, like every other time. And then Aaron, he played some guitar on that record and then did some stuff with us, after that time. So, they working together and we were just chatting and somehow it just came up about doing a song. And I was like, listen, if you guys are down, Devin and I will fly up. And, Aaron sent me just like a little, 30-second instrumental of what he had come up with. And we just started writing to it and flew up there, went in the studio and just did it. It was just it was probably my favorite studio experience, partially because working with those guys is great. Shep and Aaron, just really nice, down to earth, talented guys. Being up in upstate New York was nice too. And yeah, it was a beautiful experience, man. And I think it was a great song too. I just
Definitely was
really happy with it. Yeah.
Absolutely. So when we lost Rich and we lost Devin, were there artists that reached out to you that you recall showing their support right away? I'm guessing there were.
Oh yeah. I mean, Howie from the Backstreet Boys and Jeff from 98 Degrees, the Old Towns, those are guys that reached out to me. Yeah, listen, gosh, I can't even tell you how many text messages and emails and that I got from friends, family, fan, industry people. Just, the support was overwhelming. Yeah, like I said, man, the support from the fans has been just truly humbling. I didn't really know how they would take to me going out there representing LFO. Again, I'm not out there saying, hey, it's just me now. I'll do it by myself. I don't need anybody. I'm not doing that. I'm out there trying to honor those guys and keep the LFO legacy alive. I've got this vision for this experience I'm working on called like the LFO store or the LFO experience.
Okay.
Which would be really cool. But the fans have been so amazing. And they truly brought a lot of joy and peace to my heart through this difficult time.
What is your favorite song in the LFO cat?
Probably "Baby Be Mine."
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and actually, I was just talking to the guy that co-wrote and produced that song. His name is Dakari. Dakari played a huge role in helping to sort of mold us into who we were. And we were just talking the other day about that song and just about how great music was in the mid '90s and late '90s.
Mm-hmm. Definitely was just a different time, I guess. Well, now, Brad, the name of the interview is called Off the Radar. Generally, we try to end things with some off the radar material that the media doesn't cover. I'm going to bypass that. I'm going to put the ball in your court. If you'd like to tell one story dedicated to Rich and one story dedicated to Devin, maybe fans don't know about, or that might just let us know more about who they were as people.
Rich had a famous line, never let a few facts get in the way of a good story.
Right.
So, he could really command a room with his stories, and he'd get this look in his eyes, and this huge smile on his face, and he would just have everybody rolling. He was just one of the funniest people that ever lived. Devin, I wrote about this a little bit, but a few days before he died, he was thinking about like the press response, and he was very private. He didn't really he didn't really put a lot of thought into this kind of thing, but he just said, Brad, when it's over, can you just tell them I disappeared? And I was like, well, I said, well, I mean, okay.
That's what you want.
So yeah, that's sort of the way I look at it. Devin Lima has disappeared. I guess it's like Elvis has left the building or something like that. Yeah, but I've really, I feel their presence, and I think honoring them is to like try to live a little bit more like them. So, like Devin, he saw things in a different way than the rest of us did. I really believe he saw colors that none of us could see. If he took a walk through the woods, he wouldn't be looking just on the path. He'd be looking way deep,
Mm-hmm.
And so, I try to do that too, try to live a little more like him. Rich was a voracious writer, and
Yeah.
writing is something I really enjoy, whether it's music or poetry or fiction. So I've been trying to write more and just think about, Rich with his crumpled up paper on the bedroom floor. These days it's an iPad. You skip to the next page,
Right.
But, yeah.
Excellent. I really, really appreciate your time today. Now, before I let you go, anything else you'd like to promote, or how can fans follow your career?
Yeah, so to see what the latest and greatest is, our social media for LFO is the real LFO, and then for myself it's just Brad Fischetti, and I don't know if a lot of people know, but I wrote shortly before Devin died. I presented him with a song that I had written for him, and about 25 different people came into the studio to help me with the song, singing on the song, playing instruments on the song. So it's called Ode to Harold, and that's available, Spotify, Apple Music, everywhere else you might listen to music. But yeah, I would encourage your audience to check it out. It's a really beautiful song. It's a really long song because I wanted to give him like this beautiful sort of orchestration. So there's a point in the song where I tell him to close his eyes. And there's like a 5-minute long orchestration. They had so many instruments in here, piano, drums, violin, trombone, cello, guitars, just a beautiful orchestration. So, yeah, I would say, people want to check out Ode to Harold. That would be awesome. You mentioned Rich had his solo record, $1 Billion Sound. Devin had his Devin Lima and the Cadbury Diesel. And again, we're just at the real LFO. So we post, throwback pictures and a little bit of what's happening these days. I'm on Cameo too under the same heading, the real LFO. So lots of places to connect, and I hope to get a chance to get to know some of your audience a little more. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to help me to honor LFO.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, buddy.